Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to introduce to you Dr. Mozhgan Nasr, who is a postdoctoral fellow in the WISE Lab and works on large language models, or particularly large language and vision models as applied to visual tasks like visual question understanding and to self-driving. I think that's a very exciting future topic. It's a trend right now in research, and also some startups are exploring these ideas.
Thank you very much, Professor Sazarniki. Again, a short introduction. I'm Mozhgan, and I'm happy to be your guest lecturer for today's and Monday. The topic we're going to discuss is understanding large language and vision language models for first their foundation and then their application to autonomous driving. So the topics we are going to cover in this series of lectures is the foundation of large language models. We are going to see how earlier architectures kind of led to the transformer architectures. We're going to take a look at inside the transformer architectures, how large language models work, how vision language models see. For today and for Monday, we are going to discuss their application for autonomous driving and scene understanding, sort of like current trends and future trends and existing challenges. So let's start by a formal definition of large language models. So a very simplified definition would be like these LLMs are deep learning models which are trained on huge amount of data with the purpose of understanding and generating human-like text. Basically, they are trying to mimic how humans communicate with each other. And we can see this process as when the models are trying to process the input as a sequence of items and predict the next item within the sequence. And when we talk about these sequence, it could be sequence of items. These items can be text, audio, images, or video. And this kind of opened up a lot of interesting real-world applications, such as machine translation, text summarization, question and answering, code writing, reasoning, and a lot more. So let's see an example together. So here, let's call our LLM a blue box LLM here, where we can ask a question: how many O's are there in the word autonomous? And under the hood, this blue box LLM process this input and get us the answer as 3. So today, the purpose of today's lecture is to see inside this blue box. And to do that, let's go back to the history of natural language processing and how earlier architectures kind of led to the development of attentions and this large language models. So before deep learning area, scientists were trying to understand natural language based on rule-based approaches or statistic approaches, kind of learning the structure and the syntax behind the natural language. But then in early 20s, when the deep learning kind of came to the edge, scientists start to do amazing stuff, such as learning word embeddings, sequence-to-sequence models came to the picture. And after that, the real evolution happened when Google in 2017 released the paper "Attention is All You Need." So this paper was where the original transformer architecture was released, and based on that architecture, large language models appear. So let's start from the beginning. What are word embeddings? So word embeddings in their simplest form are a way of representing the natural language words with numbers. So basically numerical encoding of the words. And here we try to represent each word in our vocabulary based on a vector of numbers. And the purpose behind this is because we are trying to capture the semantic meaning behind each word. And how we are going to do this is to kind of find the relationship between the words. So how it is done is that basically we have pair of words such as cat and a concept cute. And we are trying to find the relationship between, if there is any meaningful relationship between these two words. So we are going to get help from neural networks, a deep neural network, where we can initialize these vector of numbers randomly at the beginning and let the model figure out what is the relationship, how often these words can appear in sentences or near each other within a context together, and give us a number, which if the number is higher means there is a better chance that these words are related to each other. So let's see this process through an example. So here, for example, we have the word cats, and we have a vector of numbers for this. As you can see, the numbers are from -1 to 1. And here to the left, we have some properties or concepts such as fruit, human, newborn. And the way the model works is that it tries to get the relationship between the vocabulary, the current vocabulary, and each of these properties. And we get a number. So if the concept is a newborn or human, the number we get is very low. But if the concept is animal or plural, because it's related to the word cats, we get a higher number. So this way, with the when we have word cats and these number of properties, we get our word embeddings, which is basically a vector of numbers. And we can repeat that for all the words in our vocabulary, such as cats, puppy, houses. And you see how these word embeddings, although they have the fixed length, the same size, because the size is depend on the properties we are having in our model, but the word embeddings are unique for each vocabulary. And these word embeddings can be very huge. For example, thousands of models, or in large language model, it can be to like millions. So the takeaway from this is that basically this way we can represent the words numerically. So let's see what's happening step by step. So let's imagine that we have a sentence, input sentence, her vocalization was melodic. And then the first step for the model is to split it up, to break this text into smaller pieces. These smaller pieces are called tokens. And the process is tokenization. So, is anyone having a question? No? Okay. So yeah, so these tokens, as you can see, can be the whole word, such as her, but sometimes it can be break up into smaller pieces, which is like partial words. And sometimes it could be even just letter level, depending on the tokenizer we are using. So after we got these tokens, our model, which let's call it a representation model, because it's learning how we are going to represent this token as a numbers. So this representation model kind of learns that the vector of numbers, the vector of representation for this token only, which is called token embeddings. And as you can see for the word vocalizations, where we have 2 tokens, the model average these 2 embeddings and get us 1 word embeddings. So we can have different level of embeddings, which are, again, just a simple numeric representations of the concepts. So we can have token embeddings, word embeddings, sentence embeddings, even document embeddings, means the whole input as just represented as only 1 vector of numbers. So here I'm going to show an example of how this can be done in real world. So here I'm using the blue sentence as an example. How can LLMs and VLMs truly understand context and so on? And I also add a capitalization word, which I write it fully in capital letters, and we'll see why, and also a special character at the end. And I'm using some of the tokenizer to see how this process is done. So here you can see BERT model. and which is a tokenizer here. And then it has 28,000 vocabulary in its vocabulary dictionary. So each color is, each token is represented by a color. You can see that some of the words are, some of the tokens are full words, and some of them are broken into pieces. And the sharp means that this token is kind of attached to the previous tokens. And as you can see, sometimes if it doesn't understand some tokens, it produce unknown or end of the sentence, or look how it tries to represent capitalization. So it kind of break capitalization into smaller pieces, like even yeah. Okay.
I'm just muting people who like when you're joining, please mute, because otherwise there is noise. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So as you can see, these earlier models with the low vocabulary size kind of break this into smaller pieces. But let's see how Phi-3 from Microsoft, where it has like more vocabulary size, though this and this text. So as you can see, now the words capitalization has better representation here, not better token breakups, split up. And then I also give it to GPT-4 tokenizer. Just remember, this is the tokenizer, not the full model, which has 100,000 of vocabulary size. And you see that capitalization here is just 2 tokens. So why this is important? Because we need a balance between the number of tokens and the number of vocabulary size in our tokenizer, because we cannot increase this vocabulary size a lot, because after that, learning the word embeddings for each tokens and each word in the vocabulary takes a lot of time and resources. So we need a balance between the number of vocabulary in our tokenizer and how we can process this as fast as possible. So we talked about how we can represent words in numbers, but at earlier stage in 2013, but then we saw there was one problem with these word embeddings. These word embeddings are very static. It means that the same embedding is generated for the words that they can have different meanings in different contexts. For example, the word model can have a different meaning in a deep learning model or a person as a fashion model. So these word embeddings were reproducing the same vector representation regardless of the context for the word, for example, for the word model. So scientists were thinking of a way that we should capture text context as well, because it can be it is important for language tasks such as machine translation and question answering and so on. So the answer to this was that how we can encode and decode context now. So then to answer this question, sequence to sequence models came to the picture. So what are sequence to sequence models? These models, they get, as we talked about earlier, a sequence of items as an input and output another sequence of items as an, generate another sequence of items as an output. So here I am showing an example from machine translation. By the way, these visualizations are from J.L. Mons from their very interesting book, Hands-on Large Language Models. So if you're interested, you can take a look at their great explanations and visualizations. Thanks for them for this great visualization. So anyhow, here we have a sequence to sequence model. Let's call it a blue box. And then we have our French sentence as an input, and the model is trying to process this under the hood and give us the answer in English, I'm a student. So this process happens one token. Let me show it one more time if we can see. Yeah. So as you can see, this process is happening, is repeating one token at a time. So this process of generating one token at a time, it's called autoregressive because the model is generating one token, and then this will go back as an input with our original input to generate the next token, and then these two are fed to the model again with the original input to get the final, and that this process goes on. So if you see word autoregressive, means that this process is repeating one step at a time. So let's take a look at a closer look inside this blue box. Here we can see that we have two stages of processing, encoding stage and decoding stage. So the encoding stage is responsible to process the input, the word embeddings or token embeddings, and generate one and only one context vector as you can look at this context vector as a summary of information based on the input, and the decoder kind of use this context vector and is responsible to generate the next output within the sequence. So now let's take a look at closer look at inside these stages. So here we see that even the encoding stage has the stack of encoders and the decoding stage has the stack of decoders. So just remember that these architectures or these green box and the purple boxes are repeated the exact same architecture. And the RNNs here stand for recurrent neural networks, which were the kind of the recurrent NNNs that were introduced earlier. Models such as long short-term memory, LSTM, GRU, and so far. We are not going to take a look at inside this RNNs. The only thing we should know here for now is that these models can process the text sequentially, means one step at a time, as you can see in this video. So that the model is processing one step even at the input. One step at a time, we have a context vector, and then the decoder does generating the output for us. But then this producing and representing the whole input only with one context vector kind of become the bottleneck of this processing, because they might fail to represent the long sequences or long documents and complex sentences. So people were trying to find a way to solve this bottleneck, which representing the whole input, especially if it is long, merely with single representation. So that's when the attention concept was kind of initially introduced in late 2014 and early 2015, where now the model, as you can see in the video, we are not going to give the decoder only one vector, only one context vector. Here we are going to give the decoder every representations that we calculated in the encoding stage, and we let the decoding stage to figure out which part of this information is useful when we are generating the next token. This process was called attention mechanism, which basically allows the model to focus on the most relevant parts of the input for generating, for example, the word student, a student. So let's see this process within an example. So here again, we have our sentence, input sentence in French. And here, these are the process of generating the next tokens within the sequence, which are our English translation. And you see these are attention scores being calculated, where in the high level understanding, these are numbers to show the relevance of this input token when generating the token I. So here, as you can see, For example, when we are generating the word I, the model is mostly, so the darker here means more relevance, more useful. So it means je is more useful when we are generating the word I, or when we are generating a student, the word étudiant is the most important. This is where the model is focusing on more when generating these tokens. So this is a high level understanding of attention. So let's see a visual, an image scenario. So here the task is image captioning, where the input is an image of a road, and the output of the model is the caption for that image. So here in these steps, you see that for generating each token, which part of the image, input image, the model is focusing on. And here, the lighter means the higher score of attention. So here you can see, for example, when the model is producing the word sign, the focus is on the image representation of sign. Or here you see when the model is trying to generate the word road, the focus is more on the image representation of a road concept, or the same for every other concepts within this generation process. So any questions so far?
Quick question. What is the number with the, like in the previous image? Is that like the
Attention scores, these
the
are,
attention
yeah.
score? Okay.
Yeah.
So how should we interpret that?
It means the relevance of the image. So here, imagine this image as a matrix of numbers, where each pixel can show of numbers, and this every number shows the relevance of the word stop to that pixel. So here it means that the average score of this part of the image was 0.36, which was a high relevancy to this part of the image.
Okay, thank you.
So it's really just
No worries.
kind of dynamic weighting, right? Yeah.
Yes, it's kind of dynamic weighting. So attention weights are just a numeric representation of the relevancy between two concepts. So here, two concepts can be a language word and a pixel in an image. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Sure, go
I
ahead.
joined 5 minutes late, so I don't know if this was covered already. But for these vision language models, what does the training data to it look like? Is it like images annotated with words over the relevant parts, or like what exactly is it?
Yeah, like if you can wait until, because we are only talking about language part here first, and then we will cover that at more at the end of the
Okay,
lecture,
so that
where we
previous
see
model,
That's
that
gonna come.
previous
Yeah, that's gonna come.
slide, was that a vision language model, or with
Pardon?
the previous slide you were over with like the
No, this is just an example of an attention, visual attention. Yeah, but we will
Okay.
see VLMs towards the end of the lecture.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So here then it comes transformers. So one problem with this process and RNNs was that they kind of process the input sequentially, means one step at a time, and this was very slow. So then Google, when released Attention is All You Need paper in 2017, introduced this new concept or architecture called transformers, when now their architecture solely is based on attention. As the name stands, attention is all you need, means removing the recurrent parts, and we can only use attention. And this was important because now this process could be done in parallel. You can process the entire document, sentence, or even a vocabulary spontaneously, like together in parallel. So it speeds up calculations significantly, and it kind of let us to stack these architecture more. But so here, At a higher level, again, we see that inside the transformer architecture, we have a stack of encoders, transformer encoders, and then a stack of transformer decoders. So at a higher level, they look like the same as sequence-to-sequence models, but inside, we see the encoder and decoders are now transformers. So let's take a look at inside this green and purple box step by step. So starting by the encoder, sorry, just a second, I can move this here. So starting by the green box transformer encoder, you see that again, we have our input sentence in French, which is broken up into tokens. Then the word embeddings or token embeddings are calculated and then are given to the encoder, which gives us the representation or context representations of this input. So at a higher level, the responsibility of this transformer encoder is to generate this context understanding. So you see that like before, we have a word representation, context representation vector for each vector, but the difference is that now these are also considering the context based, the meaning of the words based on the context. So we will see this process in a moment now. But let's take a look at inside this green box. So here you can see that I'm showing it again at a higher level. We see that there are two main submodules in the transformer encoder, something called a mechanism called self-attention and a feed-forward network. So let's start by feed-forward network. So feed-forward network is a network, a deep neural network, a fully connected layer with two layers, which is responsible to get the output of the attention, which is an intermediate representation of the words and tokens, and generate these final context-based, context-aware representation for us. But the most important part of this architecture is the mechanism called self-attention. So let's see what that is. So self-attention, again, attention concept is what allows the model to focus on the most relevant parts. But here, the key is the word self. Means here, because in contrast to previous models, now here we are calculating, we are trying to understand what's the relevancy of the input, current input token with everything else within the input. So here, for example, when we are trying to represent the word étudiant, we are also looking at other tokens in the sentence to understand. This way, we are kind of considering the context within the words. So if I want to represent this process, you can see that here we have, for example, 3 tokens, and every token is attending to the other tokens to understand its relevance. So you may think why we are doing this. Let's see an example why this can be helpful. So here again, I'm using the visualization from JML's great visualizations. So here you can see that they're showing the attention scores at layer 5 of an encoder, transformer encoder, when the sentence is, the animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired. So here we are trying to get the attention score when we are trying to represent the word it as a vector of numbers. So you see that when considering this, we are kind of paying attention to the word animal more. Means this word it is kind of telling a way to, it's kind of the way model is trying to understand what this or which vocabulary in the input sequence this it is referring to. So that's why this self-attention mechanism was helpful, because it was originally tested on machine translation. So now we can get the context within the input as well, try and understanding this. But they also kind of extend this to a concept called multi-headed attention. Means now for each concept or for each token, we are not looking at only one part of the attention scores or attention head, but also more than one. So here we are showing, for example, 2 heads, where we can basically interpret this process as that each head is looking at a different angle, looking at the input data as a different angle. So now here you see that, for example, the second head is focusing on the word tired here. So it means that kind of the adjective tired have association with the token it. So basically, all of these heads together, if we get the data from all of these heads, we are trying to tell the model which part of the sentence input is important. So now let's take a look at the decoder part. So the decoder is, as we talked before, the decoder is responsible for generating the next tokens within the output. So here, as you can see, so we have our previously generated words, and we also have the input from the original input, from the representation from the original input, from the encoder part. And then the decoder, the purple box, is responsible to generate the next token. And just remember that this process is autoregressive, means one token at a time. So for example, we have I, then we have I, and the encoder output for generating the word am, and then for generating the word we have I am and the input, and so forth, so on. So let's take a look at inside the decoder. So here you can see 3 main submodules called masked self-attention, cross-attention, and feed-forward. So again, let's talk about feed-forward first. So feed-forward, again, is the same architecture as before. It has a fully connected neural network where it gets the representation from previous layer and try to generate the next token. But let's talk about cross-attention and masked self-attention. So here, masked self-attention, again, is a self-attention, means we are comparing, we are getting the scores for the same input and output. So here, both of them are our output, because we are in the decoder part of the transformer. So this is where the self part comes in. But why mask? Because when generating each word, we don't want to look at the future, because we don't know what future tokens are. So when generating the token I, we are only looking at itself. When generating the word or token am, we are only looking at I am, previously generated works. That's why the upper side diagonal of this matrix is masked, means we are not considering those numbers, because we don't know, we don't want to have a leakage from the future. So to the right, you can see this, or to the left, you can see this process where for generating each token, we are only looking at the previous generated tokens, not the future. So this is called mask self-attention. And I hope you can guess by now that cross-attention means now we are calculating these scores for the output of the encoder and the generated tokens from the decoder. So basically, this paper introduced 3 types of attentions. So first, the encoder self-attention, where each token is attending to all other tokens. no matter in past or future. We are trying to understand the concepts within the input. So we are looking at everything. Then we have the decoder mask self-attention, where for generating each token, we are only looking or attending to the past tokens and figure out which one is the most important and relevant for generating this token. And the cross attention, encoder-decoder attention, when we are for generating the current token, we are looking back at the input tokens and see how these are relevant for generating the current token. So this is the main contribution of this paper. So this Google introduced this original transformer architecture in 2017, where as we see, we have a sentence input. The encoder is responsible to get this context representation of the word, and this context is used by the decoder to generate the next words. But most recent models which is called generative models, generative large language models, actually, what they do is that they are decoder only based models. So it means that when we have an input as a prompt, sometimes called prompt, so this input is processed by the decoder to generate the next tokens. So here, the current, the most large language models we see now today are decoder-based only transformers. So let's see an example. So here I am showing GPT-1, which was the first of its type. GPT, as you know, stands for generative pre-trained transformers. So if we take a look at inside this GPT language, we see that we have our input, we have the word embeddings, token embeddings, and then each part is a transformer decoder only. So because there is no encoder, so as you can see inside this purple box, we don't see any cross attention anymore, because the decoder is now responsible for both parts to process the input and then generate next output. So the original GPT model had 12 layers of these transformer decoders stacked on top of each other, which makes the model very having a high number of parameters. So if we compare this, GPT-1 had almost more than 100 million tokens, and GPT-2 billion more, and then GPT-3 more than 175 billion parameters. So that's why these models are called large language models now, because they have a high number of parameters. So here, let's take a look at the year where it was called a year of generative AI, where at the end of late 2023, ChatGPT was introduced, which is technically is GPT 3.5. And then after that, other models followed. They can be proprietary, where they are closed source. We don't know the weights within them. We may know how they work, but the weights are not publicly available for us to use. And then at the bottom, you see the open source large language models, where they come up, and most of these are following the GPT, they are using decoder only architecture. So if you see that, for example, Llama is a decoder only architecture, which has a large number of stacked transformers on top of each other, and so on. And this is only till 2024. And after that, we also have a lot more, which are basically more visual language models we are going to talk about later. So let's see. Now, at the beginning of the slide, we talk about this blue box LLM, where we can ask a question and get an answer. So now we know that, for example, we can have an input. So because this input is not always a question, we are calling it prompt. Okay, we are calling it a prompt, which is basically an instruction we are giving to the model. Write an email inviting Sarah for a coffee meetup. This process this input and start generating the response for us. And remember, this is an autoregressive. Sorry. Excuse me. So this is an autoregressive process, means the output is generating one token at a time. But because these models, thanks to GPUs, powerful GPUs, is fast and faster, we may not see this process one token at a time. But then we get this answer. So now we know that what is happening inside this blue box. First, the input is processed by a tokenizer, which is responsible to splitting up this tokenizer into smaller pieces and give it to transformer to understand the relevancy between these, the context, and so on. And the transformer is responsible to understand this to understand the underhood of what is the context of these words, what is being asked for, what does it do basically in higher level, and give us an output. And a language model head is responsible because here at the tokenization, we change the words into numbers so that transformers would understand. But now the transformers give us the numbers. But now we are going to give the response back to the humans. So we have to change it back to actual words, to the natural words. So the language model head is responsible to generating these tokens and changing them back to the way that we understand, so that we see Dear Sarah and so on. So any questions so far? Okay, no, so let's continue. So then later on, scientists were thinking about, yeah, we have these amazing large language models, but what about beyond text items? What about audio, images, video? So then the multimodal large language models appear. And as the name stands, means they consider more than one modality. So now the input or the output could be not only text, but also image, video, or audio. So these are called multimodal large language models. But for today, we are only considering two modalities, which is image and text, which gives us vision language models. So at a higher level, these vision language models combine images and text for multimodal understanding, and this kind of open up a new interesting real-world applications such as image captioning, robotics, VQA, that is standing for visual question answering, and autonomous driving. So here, instead of text and text, we have text and image as an input. We give it to let's call it a blue box VLM for now, and then we get the response, which is a text for now, because it's a question and answering task. So this, and I'm using GPT-4o to get this, these are real question and answer from GPT-4o model. So here you can see that as an input, we can have two modalities, the text and the image, and the answer is text, but also we can have the only image and a text as an output, but because we are kind of changing the modality, it's still a dual modality. So this is image captioning, where we are trying to understand, to tell a story based on an image. So both of these are kind of some applications or VLMs. But let's take a look at inside this blue box VLMs. So here, this is what we are familiar from the before. This is the language transformers, firstly introduced in 2017. We had the sentence. We break up the input into tokens, the word embeddings. The transformer encoder was responsible to get this context word embeddings for us, the higher, richer representation of the, excuse me, of the input. So now a concept called vision transformers were introduced, or VITs. So VITs follow the same concepts. So when having an input image, they break it up into smaller pieces. These smaller pieces are called patches in the original paper, which is here. An image is worth 16 by 16 words. So these smaller pieces are called patches. So here you can see that each image could be like 60 by 16, 2056 patches. And each patch now has its embeddings. And these initial embeddings are given to the transformer encoder to get the representation, higher level, rich representation of each patch of the image or part of the image. And to our surprise, the same architecture is used for this transformer encoder. So the only change is that now we are changing the input as the instead of text tokens to image patches. And we stack up these transformer blocks on top of each other to get a higher representation. That is how vision transformers are working. But then you may ask, so what is the language part? So then in 2021, OpenAI introduced the model CLIP, which stands for Contrastive Language Image Pre-training. So here you can see that for training, we have, I suppose one of you had this question that how the training data for example, CLIP is working. So here is an example. We have the way CLIP was pre-trained was that the training data look like we have images, and then we have a short caption for each image, a red apple, an office chair, a dog. So basically the task here OpenAI was trying to do was trying to teach the model that this image representation and this text representation are basically showing the same concepts, but differently. Or this image of the chair and this word of written word are showing the same concept. So the way they do this is that they train a text encoder and an image encoder jointly together. So now we are giving the images to our image encoder, which is a vision transformer, and we are giving the text, which are the text transformers, to our text encoders. And at each step, first we encode this into text embeddings and image embeddings, shown in purple and orange. And then the way we are going to train this model is that the model is trying to figure out the similarity between these text embeddings and these image embeddings. So here we see the model is trained to kind of increase the similarity of between the image and text encodings where they are matching. So this is the image embeddings for the chair, and this is the text embeddings for the word chair. So the model is trying to learn that these two are highly similar or relevant. And then in case of the opposite, it's trying to decrease this similarity of non-matching, so that the image of a dog is different from the word here, for example, or caption a red delicious apple. So, and they repeated this process through the whole batch. So as you see, CLIP was trained for with more than 400 million image caption pairs. They were randomly picked up from the internet, and this kind of now the results was now we have a powerful text encoder and a powerful image encoder, which not only were trained based on images, but also in a way that they are kind of understand the relevance between the images and text. So you may see this, this is important because current VLMs are using, most of the actually current VLMs are using the power of CLIP image encoder for their VLMs. So let's see that process. Any questions so far? No.
I guess
okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
I guess in the various CLIP architectures, like what architectures are used for text encoding?
Yeah, so the text encoder is actually fixed, which is the exact transformer we see in attention all unit paper with a little variance, a little changing for stability. The text encoder is fixed, it's a transformer, but for the image encoder, they kind of test different variations, which, for example, one would be ResNet, a convolution without any transformer, and different types of vision transformer. And the difference comes from the size of the patches within the transformer. So when we have, for example, CLIP VIT large 14, means it's a large number of a stack of vision transformers, with each of them having 14 as the number of channels within the model. So it gives us like 14 by 14 words for each image. But the text encoder is always a transformer.
Perfect. I guess one more quick question. I guess we skipped this detail that the sequence of, for example, word embeddings that are given to transformer, they're also augmented with positional encoding. So in terms of sequence. But I kind of wonder now for images, you could unroll images into patches in one dimension, or you could encode the position in 2 dimensions. And I wonder what's
it is actually. Yeah, this is actually what is happening under the hood. So here I'm not showing the positional encoding, but here it's actually this initial vector is combined with positional encoding. And positional encoding is just where we are trying to understand the time, the order of the patches. So position encoding is just, for example, if this is the first patch, so we have a vector which is to the size of the number of patches, and only the position 1 is 1 and the rest is 0. So it tells the model that it belongs to the top left of this image. And that is multiplied by all these embeddings and then goes to the input of the transformer. Yeah, so this is the part that I'm not showing within the slides. Yeah.
And I guess my question was whether for images, the positional encoding is linear, or I mean, like in 1 dimension, or whether encodes 2 dimensions.
Yeah, no, it is linear. Yeah, it is linear. It's the same as the text.
Right.
It just tells, it's just a.
I mean, as long as you keep this, I suppose, like if you had different number of like once you have a linear encoding, if it's always fixed in terms of I don't know, you've got like here always 6 tiles, right? So then you always know that the first one is like the first top left corner, and the last one it's like maybe the bottom right corner, right? But if you had varying number of visual tokens, then it would not be entirely clear what the correspondence is, right? Where is the first row and where is the second row of the image. So, but anyway, that's maybe a detail. And I wonder if there's any kind of work looking into this, how you would then encode the positional encoding.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, but the original vision transformer is using a fixed positional encoding. Yeah. So, but so the thing is that on top of my head is that you also have to have a dynamic positional encoding vector representation, which so you just have to define the size based on the number of patches you get. So,
All right, thank you.
that is what I think. Yeah, no worries.
Thanks.
So then we come to the architecture inside this blue box. So let's start with what we have seen before. So here we see that large language models, they have the text, they're going to a tokenizer to get text tokens, and these are changed, getting the embeddings and so forth, and a large language model process this input and generate the output. But what about the image size now in the vision language parts? So now we have, as we have a text encoder or tokenizer for text, we need something similar for the images called vision encoder, which is responsible to get this higher richer representations of the original image or the video. And then this vision encoder could be, for example, clip vision encoder, which is why the most of the current models are doing. And then this, when it is processed, now we have an image only, a representation which is based on image, but here we have text. So now we need something, a layer or a number of layers that kind of align this vision or image representation to the input representation of these large language models, because these language models are trained in a way to understand text embeddings only. So now we cannot give these image embeddings directly to the model and let it understand what it is. So instead, to make the process easier for them, and also the complexity and the time we are going to train this, we are freezing these large language models, and we give this layer so that we kind of align. So this layer called projection layer is also called adaptation layer or alignment layer. So here we kind of project or align these image embeddings to the input to embeddings or in input space of the large language models. That is the purpose of this projection layer, so that the model understands images as well. So let's see an example. So this is the full architecture, and let's see a real world example called Lava. So Lava family, which had a lot of variations, but the originally was introduced in RIPS 2023. So how they did this process was that first, as you can see, the images are going through the clip vision encoder. We get the image embeddings, and then these embeddings are going through a simple MLP layer. And this was the power of this VLM, because previous models were using or complex and complemented projection layers, but Lava family were kind of saying that only a simple nonlinear layer would be enough, which is kind of make this process so much faster and easier to replicate. So now a simple MLP layer would be enough to project the image embeddings to the input embeddings of the LLM. For the LLM, they are using Vecona, which is a variant of Llama from Meta. And 7B is the number of parameters in the large language model. So usually you see that the models are called, for example, we say Lava 7B, but it means the language, large language model part, because the parameters of vision encoder, MLP, and the tokenizer are very, very low in comparison with the large language model. So it would be, for example, 7.2 billion model in general, but we usually refer them as Lava 7B. And this architecture is somehow what you can see in Flamingo family, InterVL family, GPT-4 from GPT-4 version V, which is vision, and then GPT-4o, and so on. Any questions? No. So let's talk about how they were trained. So the way that these models are trained is that, so OpenAI pre-trained Clip for us because it's a long process. Not everybody have the resources and the time to do this from scratch. So now we have a powerful vision encoder ready, and the parameters are available. Another group also trained large language models for us. There are very powerful large language models currently available. So thanks to them, we are not going to pre-train and train those models from scratch again. So now we have this frozen vision encoder, frozen LLM. So at the first stage, what we are going to do is to train this MLP or projection layer to let the model learn the alignment between the embeddings. And once we have this trained MLP, now we can do a soft or second fine tuning, which is called the SFT for a stage of training, or a stage 2 of training, which is for most of the available models out there is end-to-end, means everything is unfrozen and we are training everything. But this, remember, this is not training from scratch. We are just fine-tuning these vision encoders and large language models with respect to the MLP layer that we have in case of Lava, or this projection layer could be something else. So basically usually in most of the VLMs out there, you will see that they're contained these two main stages. They may have a stage 3 or something in between to have better alignments or considering more data or performing efficiency. But these two stages, you will see them in every VLM out there. Pre-training and a fine-tuning, where also this fine-tuning stage can kind of let us to train these VLMs now for different tasks. So for example, if we want to do question answering, we can just get a VLM and just train it with our question and answer, fine-tune it with our question and answering data. Or I hope you guessed that, for example, if you want to do machine translation, we can train them for machine translation. If now we want to do object detection, where the model understands boxes around the objects, we can train that with enough data. So basically a wrap up for today's lecture. The takeaway was that we see how LLMs work. We kind of take a look at how earlier architectures come to the design of original transformers, and then at that large language models, we kind of see inside VLMs and how they are trained to understand not only text, but also images. So now I have a question for you. How do you think these LLMs or VLMs can be useful or can be used for autonomous driving?
How this might be used for autonomous driving, and I think that's great. Basically, just saying that vision is of course important, but how is language important? Well, language is important because it gives you concepts to understand the world. But I think you can also think about other aspects that robots need in terms of spatial understanding, temporal understanding, commands, such as, for example, encoding of movements or trajectories, actions, and so on. All of those you can think of as different modalities, right? And so then obviously multimodal models can go beyond just text and vision. You can code other types of information, including structured information. And so that's how you can kind of think of these models that were originally developed just for language, but they're kind of like multi-purpose computing units that can process all sorts of inputs and outputs, right? And so that's how we can then use them for autonomous robots, right? Not just autonomous driving.
Last session, we talked about the foundation of language models. We take a look at inside transformers, LLMs, and VLMs. And today our focus will be mostly on these, their application on autonomous driving field and scene understanding. But before starting with that, there were some questions asked at the end of the previous session that I kind of promised that go through them at the beginning of this session. So let's do that. As a recap, we talked about large language models. Let me start the laser point. We see that we can have a prompt. We give it to the blue box LLM, and we take a look at inside an LLM where we have a tokenizer, decoder only, decoder based only, transformers, and a language head that produced one token at a time for the response. And we say that this process was called autoregressive. We also talked about word embeddings, which are in the simplest form and numerical representations of the words. And one question asked was how these word embeddings are kind of trained in practice. So here we are today. We now take a look at a sample loss function or an objective function here for a model called word2vec. So the way this model was trained is that first we can have a vector representation of a target word, and the target word means the word we are trying to learn its word embeddings at the current time. For each word, we talked about that we have some property concepts or context words. So then we have a context word, which is basically some words we call, we think that the word, for example, cats is most related to, or they are they reoccur close to each other within sentences. So basically we have these positive pair samples together. We perform a dot product, which is we are trying to multiply their vector in the embedding space, and we add a sigmoid function on top of it to get a value between 0 and 1. And then this part is telling the model to maximize this similarity. So we are trying to maximize the similarity between the embedding of the target word and the context word. And for the second part, now we are not using a positive sample, but we are going to use some negative samples. And these negative samples, or WI, are the words that we are chosen randomly and we hope that they are not within the context of the target word. And this means that they do not occur that much together or in the close proximity of each other within the sentences. And or another way of looking at this is that we are sampling some random words from a noise distribution. So here, because of these negative signs, it means that we are trying to reduce the similarity or maximize the dissimilarity between these the target word and these negative sampling words. So, and because we have more than one negative sample words, we kind of sum through all this dissimilarity between the negative samples and the target word. So at the higher level, it's sort of a contrastive loss still, where we try to learn to maximize the similarity between similar words and dissimilarity between non-similar or out of context words. So this was one of the questions asked. And then I also promised that to give this sentence. We already seen this in the last session, but one question asked was, what if we remove all the spaces within the context, within the sentence, and we give it to tokenizer and see what happens next? So here, the bottom ones are the one with the same sentence, but without any spaces. So here we already see that BERT had some problem understanding some of the tokens, some of the vocabularies, such as, for example, capitalization, has a high number of tokens using BERT model because it had a smaller word vocabulary size. But then if we don't use any spaces, you can see that the BERT really has a problem understanding these words, because within BERT, we see that whenever there is a double sharp sign, it means that this token is attached to the previous one. So the BERT has problem understanding the words. It thinks all of this is just one word, with the exception of some. But so in the case of BERT, it's not only ambiguous, but it also thinks that the whole text is one huge vocabulary. I also give the same sentence without any space to 5 from Microsoft and see that the performance is somehow better, but you see that still there are some ambiguities, such as the word truly and the S, plural S after the VLMs. So it's kind of break it. It doesn't understand the word truly. And you see some problems here as well, where it doesn't understand itself is so dynamic. And then also I give it to GPT-4 models. And please note that this is not the latest GPT model, because the latest versions are not publicly available. They are not accessible for us, but this was at least 1 year old tokenizer. And you can see that even GPT, which has more than 100,000 of vocabulary size, when there is no space between the tokens, it has problem between the words, it has problem understanding the word truly, or even in this case, it says under and stand as a separate words and tokens. So then we also talked about VLMs, and we see that in addition to text tokenizer, we also have a vision encoder or image encoder to get the embeddings from the images or the videos. And then we see that the output of this is not useful to go inside the large language model. And there we need a projection layer or an alignment layer so that it aligns or projects the output of this visual encoders to the input space of the large language models. But then one question raised was how this process is actually done in practice. So today I'm going through an actual implementation of this process from our latest work in Wise Lab called Leo model. And this paper is available on arXiv, and the full code is available on the link provided in it. So if you are interested, you can take a look at the full code. But here we are just going through the parts that are mostly relevant to the process of how visual and text tokens are merged in practice, where the LLM, which is already trained on text-only data, understand visual text as well. So we already know that our training data has a number of samples. These samples are kind of grouped into batches to be analyzed by the model, and each batch has its a number of training samples. And here we are just seeing a definition function that tries to read the next sample within the training or the current batch, let's say. And here you can see it is called multimodal. Means this function is only for when we have an image and a text. So we can have a pure text getting item function, or a video model getting item. So here I just show the multimodal. So it means we have an image and a text. And the first part of this code is written to make sure that the first conversation contains an image placeholder. But let's see what is this image placeholder and what is the role behind it, and why this is important to have such a thing as image placeholder. So here, to understand that, let's take a look at inside a sample training data. So here is a JSON format, a structured question and answer. You can see that each training sample can have an ID, which we can retrieve it based on that. We can have the location of the images where the model can go and read and load the images from the memory. But the most important part where you can see this in every large language model out there is the conversation. Because as we see before, an LLM, we ask a question as a prompt or give instruction, and then we need a response, textual response. So this is kind of a conversation between a human and a robot or a machine. So that's why the training data out there, almost every training data out there has a conversation style, because the LLMs understand, are trained based on this conversation. So each LLM has a conversation style, but different LLMs have different styles. So, but here, the LLM used in Leo has this type of a style where you can see where the question or the prompt is called from human, and the value from this human is the prompt, render a clear and concise summary of the photo. And this token image, this is called image placeholder. So this is where this image placeholder comes from. And we are going to make sure that even if the user forgets to put this at the end of the query, and the some training sample includes an image, so we want to make sure that this image placeholder is there. And we will see why this is important later in the slides. And then we have the answer from GPT, which its value means it's the response of the LLM. And this is just a sample. So this GPT could be machine, robot, non-human, the answer, but this is the way most LLMs were trained, because I guess their training data was kind of produced by GPT. So this could be anything. It doesn't mean the answer is from GPT model. So we have a conversation style, then we make sure that even if the user forgets this image placeholder, we add it to the conversation. Then we do some pre-processing for the image. So here we are trying to get the image path, which we see in the image conversation part. And then we load these images. If there should be any pre-processing to the images, this is the part that is happening. I'm not going through the Leo's dynamic pre-processing step here, but the high level is that we are just breaking up the images into tiles for later pre-processing. And then each visual encoder, if we have one or even two or more, they can have their own pre-processing, and we can understand or take a look at this pre-processing stage as, like, for example, normalizing the input images, or if a resize, for example, clip needs images to be into a specific size. So here, if we should do any resizing, we do this. So this part is only pre-processing of the input images, and then we transfer the pixel values into tensors to be used later. Then this part is the most kind of important here, because here this is the part where we are giving the input for the tokenizer. So we see the conversation style. We see that we are giving to this model the conversation from the training sample with an image placeholder. So let's take a look at this pre-processing style, which is this pre-process is different from each large language model you use. So here, again, this is a large function, but I'm just showing the most relevant part here. This is how the image tokens are handled in this part of the code. So if we are not only text only, means we also have an image in our conversation. So now we are saying that we have an image start token. We have this special token called image context token. And then we multiply by the number of image tokens we have. We will see this process in next slide in more details. So here, the high level understanding is now we are telling the model, before giving the conversation to the tokenizer, replace this image holder where we put in the conversation with these special tokens. And this is the way we are trying to let the model know that this image placeholder is going to be filled with image embeddings later on. But let's see the process in more detail. So now we see that in case of Leo, we have 3 specialized token, which the LLM is fine-tuned to learn this. And this is the token for, okay, I'm showing the end of image at the beginning. So this is for the start of the image, means this one. This is the image context, which is the values within the image. And this is the end of the token. And these are its corresponding token IDs. So in details, if we have a user and the prompt is image placeholder plus a question, is there any obstacle in your way? And let's say that these number of image tokens in our model is 5. So in reality, for the case of Leo, it's 512, but for description purposes, let's just consider that the number of tokens we are using to describe each image in our model is just 5. So this part of the code is basically doing this. Now the conversation is that to replace these special tokens in case of the image placeholder. So because we have only one image, we have only one start of the image, one end of image, and we have 5 repeated times of this special context, image context. So why these special tokens are important? Because as we see, tokenizer for LLMs tend to break up the tokens or words into smaller pieces. So defining special tokens helps us that prevent the model from breaking up these images, because later on we are going to replace them. So for image embeddings. So now when the model sees something like this, it does not breaking up into, for example, image, underline, and context. And this would be the input of the tokenizer of the large language model. So here we define the output of the tokenizer as a vector called input IDs, because the way the language model is working on is based on the token IDs rather than the words themselves here. So here we are now going inside the Leo model within the forward pass. Again, I'm not showing the full forward pass, but just the relevant part. So here, this is the input to the tokenizer, the output to the tokenizer. And now we are going to give this tokenizer output to the language model's embedding function to get the embeddings for textual input. So then we have a vector input embeddings, including image tokens, image placeholders for image embeddings, which are going to be filled later. But then you can see here separately, the visual embeddings are calculated. So extract features, because Leo has 2 visual encoders, so you can see here that we have 2 VIT embeddings vectors, which is the output of visual encoder 1 and the output of visual encoder 2, which based on an algorithm, they are going to be merged. I'm not going through this part here, but the final output is a vector of merge visual embeddings. So now we are going to replace this visual embeddings into the input embeddings in the place that we define these image placeholders, or we have this masked input embeddings. So here you can see that later in the forward pass, we have our input embeddings, we reshaped them, and this is just to flattening the vector embeddings so that the later process can be done more efficiently and faster. So then when these are replaced, I'm not showing the irrelevant code snapshots, but you can take a look at it later. And then now that we have the input embeddings, we try to get the mask that we created before. We are saying that which part, which location we are using image placeholder. And then when we get these places, then we replace them or fill them with the calculated image embeddings we calculated separately. So this way, we now have the input embeddings of the large language model or our VLM, where text embeddings are produced separately and the image embeddings are produced separately and then filled in place of the image place holders. And then the output, we give this as the input of the large language model, which then gives us the generated next token one step at a time or auto-regressively. So if you want to show this process in a nutshell, is that we have an input embeddings where we have image placeholders, and these image embeddings are calculated separately and then are filled or replaced by these placeholders. So I hope this is more clear than the explanation from last session. Any question? Okay, so I guess not. And then we also, yeah. And we also talked about a context length, and I also wanted to go through it because later on we see that how this context length can be kind of a bottleneck of VLM models, especially when we are applying them for autonomous vehicle. So we talked about that large language models has a concept called a window of context length. But let's see what is this in practice. So we have a sentence, tell me something about dogs. We know that the tokenizer is going to break it up. And for the sake of argument, let's say that the tokenizer is splitting this sentence at the word level, perfect words, and the dot. So tell me something. Here we see the count that we have 6 tokens at the current moment. So LLMs have this concept of maximum number of tokens they can process at any given time. And they are trained based on this maximum number of tokens. So here, if we give these tokens to the LLM, it will start generating the next token autoregressively. And even these generated tokens are counted within the maximum number of tokens. So here, current context length is 8. But why this is important? Because, for example, if a large language model has only a maximum number of tokens of 8, then anything comes after this. So if the input is larger than 8 tokens, only 8 tokens are considered. So if you give a sentence more than like 100, only the first 8, the last 8 are considered. And that's it. So the rest will be truncated. It's like the model is going to ignore it. Another problem is that if you are just giving like only 7 tokens, so the model can generate only 1 token for you, because this is also counted. So this is why you will see, for example, if you send a huge large prompt to even GBT, you will see that it says that the text is too long. Make it shorter, because they want to make sure that it understands your prompt. So in practice, for example, GPT-4 model has more than 8,000 context lengths. The most recent models have more than 100,000 context lengths in practice, which is a huge number. But the most current openly available VLMs have something close to this number. So this was kind of brushing up on what we discussed last session, but this session, let's go and see how this concept can be used for autonomous vehicle. So here I'm just as a recap of a conventional autonomy stack, where you can see the not the end-to-end process, but the modular process. We have the sensors and the maps, basically the inputs. We are trying to see what objects are around, where are they going, so that we can plan where we should go, and the final step of decision making and control. So today we are going to talk about what's the motivation if this process is already working. So what's the motivation of using or adding language to this process? So here we can see that it can be useful for example, perception. We can have open vocabulary perception now without any predefined classes. We can have counterfactual scenarios where we can say in an imaginary or simulation, we can say, what if now a pedestrian is running in front of you? We can have planning. We can let the language generate the next step for us. We will see the examples in future, but this is the overall view of what language can do. And the most important part is the providing the higher level reasoning, or now we can have interpretability or explainability, where not only the self-automated vehicle is driving, but also telling us why it's behaving in the way that it does. Or we can communicate with the vehicle while it is driving within the streets. So let's see some examples of these applications. Before seeing the applications, so let's talk about the data sets and why, how this process can be done. So the way VLMs enable scene understanding for autonomous driving is through a task called visual question answering. And as the name is kind of self-explanatory, this VQA means that a model takes an image and a question as an input, and the question is about that image, and it provides generate a textual answer for us. How this is useful? It can help us with interpretability, explaining traffic events in natural language, or in the latest models, even assisting in the decision making process of autonomy stack. So we have, as an example, we have a driving scene. For example, here, this is actual driving scene being driven in England, and we can ask a question from the car: why are you stopped? What are the top 3 hazards you are paying attention to? And so forth. So the most current trend is kind of understanding why the vehicle is behaving in a way that it does. So in order to do this, we need some specialized data sets. But why aren't the available standard VQA data sets enough for this process? Excuse me. The answer is no, because these, if you are going to train or fine tune the LLM to do a new task, so you need new data for that specialized task. So although you can use a top shelf VLM and through a driving data set, through a question, driving scene image, and ask a question, but the answer will not have a high accuracy. So yes, we need this specialized VQA data sets for autonomous driving. So here we can see some sample data sets that they are available to use for research purposes, and you can see the year they were introduced, and this is till only mid 2024, and we will see some later data sets as well within the examples. But here you can see that these data sets can have question and answer based on a driving image. They can have captions, only a description from a driving scenario. This is the number of frames each model can have, and the number of question and answer or captions. And here you can see that these data sets may include only a textual description, an image, or point clouds and HD maps. We will talk about different modalities in further slides as well. So here, let's see some real examples of available data set. So one of the most can I say recent data sets was Drive LM introduced by Open Drive Lab, where they kind of, the paper was accepted at ECCV 2024, but it was originally used in CVPR Autonomous Driving Challenge in last June, where different teams tried to kind of get higher accuracy score on this data set. And the way this data set is created is that it takes an already existing driving scenario, driving data set available, more specifically new scenes, which new scenes has multi-view images from a driving scene with object detections, locations, and already annotated for autonomous driving tasks. But the way they create their Drive LM is now they add visual question and answering based on each drives. And the way they do it is based on a graph representation. It means that first they design some perception-based visual question answer. What are the objects in front of the ego car? And based on these perception questions, then they design some prediction questions. Now that you know there is a motorcycle here, so predict its future status. So, and then later on, they based on these two, so this is already becoming a graph, kind of having a causal reasoning between the questions. So then we have prediction, we can now have planning. So now based on this scenario, what should you do? And then we can also have the actual action as an output of the large language model. Something to notice here is that this action is still a textual representation, a high-level textual description of the action. So the output is not the actual trajectory coordinates, but only, for example, a top-level maneuver, for example, turning right or slowing down. But we will see later examples with actual coordinates output as well. So another data set, useful data set, was LingoQA data set. And the difference between this data set and the previous one is that they're trying to use free-form text. It means that the answers are not short answers anymore. We can have larger length words, which kind of help us have more or better or more natural way of descriptions and answer. And another point was that there is not only one ground truth for each or one correct answer for each question, but also the way they introduce their data set, produce their data set is there is, for example, 2 or 3 correct answer. We will see why they did this later on, but why they have this more than one correct answer for each, and a wide range of driving tasks. Again, driving reasoning, perception, justification, and so on. So if you see the dataset itself, you can see the training has 2 parts: a scenery dataset, mostly focused on perception task, and action dataset, which mostly on parts that the vehicle behavior changes. For example, why you are slowing down, what if there is a I don't know, kid running in front of you. So actions and justification. And the evaluation data set has a combination of both, has some samples from both scenery and action data set. So let's see how LingoQA, they also released a VLM.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Sure.
And I guess there is a question actually. I see the hands up, so I'll let whoever has the hand up go first.
Yep. So
Vishal, go ahead.
Yep, we have the scenery, action, and evaluation models here. So would those be the same language model, or would they be trained separately?
So the scenery and action dataset are the training data sets. So what you can do is that to only train on scenery, only train on action, or train on both of these data sets. But the evaluation data set contains data samples from both tasks, both perception and action and justification.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So like would the scenery and action be the same model? Or would people typically
Yeah,
split
the
it up?
same model. Yeah, we use the same model to train. It's just different parts of data sets. But yeah, we use the same VLM to train on both of this or just one of them. It's the same VLM. We will see their VLM in a second.
Cool, thank you.
No worries.
I guess I have just a quick question. So, you know, particularly, well, I guess both for understanding and for action, you know, depending on a situation, you may require more than one frame to understand it. And I wonder if, like with current models, like, you know, what are the number of frames that would be analyzed sort of at once and in order to perform well on these benchmarks?
Yeah, so we will see the actual benchmark in a bit where they use 5 keyframes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and they also did an ablation study based on the number of frames, and they say, if I remember correctly, they performed on 1 frame and 3 frame and 7 frames, and the 5 was the best.
Okay.
Yeah, so like not always having even more frames because they kind of extract the keyframes from the videos. So they didn't release the video, they just released the 5 keyframes. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
So yeah, no worries. So here, this is the actual VLM they released for these data sets, and it's called Lingo QA from the Wave company. Yeah, sure.
Just to make sure I understand. So even in this data set, in the Lingo QA, you don't have full videos. You only have the keyframes released.
Exactly, yes. We just have 5 images for each training sample.
Yeah, and did they say whether the keyframes are like equally spaced, or did they like?
No, this is not. Yeah, if I remember correctly, they didn't release how these keyframes were extracted, or if they are in terms of time, if they are separate, equally sampled. Yeah, we don't know the time difference between each keyframe, but I can go and double check and see what's. But
Thank you.
I don't remember such information in their paper.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. So here we already see that a VLM can have an image or multiple image as an input, where here we see that the video is actually a multi-frame images. Each image is going through a visual encoder. If you remember, we talked about clip, but for those who weren't present at the last session, clip, clip is just a visual encoder trained based on word and image and text similarity. So for now, let's just call it a visual encoder where it gets the input image and output intermediate visual embeddings. And then we talked about before talking about QFormer, we talked about that we also have text, which going through a text tokenizer, and the visual tokens and the text tokens are going into large language model to give us the answer. And the way this model was trained was that it was trained with more than 22 million data at the first stage, and this is not autonomous driving data. This is just training the model to perform better on visual question answering task. So here we are not training for the autonomous driving field, but also only for visual question answering task. And then we fine tune the model for autonomous driving field only on Lingo QA. So now we also talked about a projection layer where the output of the visual encoder is aligned in the input space of the large language model. And if you recall, we saw an example that this projection layer could be a simple 2-layer MLP. But another common projection layer you will see in a lot of paper is QFormer, and I would like to go inside. Let's see inside this QFormer because it's been used in a lot of papers. So let's see what is this projection layer. So a VLM called Bleep2 was released in 2023 after Clip kind of introduced its contrastive loss training. So now when they wanted to align the output of the visual encoders and the input of the LLM, they use this module called QFormer. The way it's working is that first we have a learnable query embeddings, which can be initialized randomly, or it can be initialized with pre-trained embeddings from other models, other representation models, such as BERT and so on. But we have this. This is used to kind of control the number of visual tokens. So here, the whole module, the purpose is to get the output of the visual encoder and align it to the input. So how it does work is that it's not only paying attention to the image features or image embeddings only, but it also tries to get or select the visual encoders based on the relevance to the query itself, to the question. So based on the question asked on the same image, we can have a different image encoding or visual tokens now. So this is the whole idea of QFormer. Instead of having a prefixed alignment for each image, now we can have we talked about attention and self-attention. We are attending to the useful information within that image based on the input query. So this is called query transformer, or sorry, this is a typo. So it's called query transformer, or in short called QFormer. Introduced in Clip, but you can see that Lingo QA used this as their projection alignment, which is basically they just use the pre-trained parameters and weights and used in their model. Any questions?
Yep. So for the QFormer, like how long is the output? Yeah, first of all, how long is the output? And second of all, like with the sequence of QFormers, is the point to like fill up an image context? Or like how long would the image context or like the embedding tokens for the images be?
So depending on the number of tokens or token lengths we can have for image, it's a design choice for each VLM out there. So for example, for Lingo QA, if I remember correctly, because their base model is Lava, so they are not introducing a new architecture. They are kind of using they are taking a VLM out of a shelf and just fine-tuning. So the Lava model, which they are kind of using, it has a context visual image number of tokens of 256 for each image. So this has a length of 256, but it's a design choice. For example, for a model called our model called Leo, it's 512 for each image. So it's a design choice, and you can see, for example, you can learn this empirically, like how many visual tokens are used, can lead better representations for the model. And you can see even later at the current model, we see that models even trying to reduce this number of visual tokens to kind of address the context length problem within the VLMs. So the first question was, how many number of visual tokens? It depends on your design choice. It's not a fixed number. We can have any. So these QFormers, you see different QFormers. If you just look at just one image, we only have one QFormer. So it's not a stack of QFormers on top of each other. It means that each frame in a video is analyzed separately by the model. So here, each image or each frame is analyzed individually.
So is it like just sequentially concatenating the results of the Q-formers into like 5 image contexts?
Yeah, at the end, exactly. So at the end, again, we can have different types of merging algorithms, but at the end, the way this model works is just sequentially put the output of these Q-formers one after another for this video. So yes. Make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And so they are kind of using transformers on top of transformers, because CLIP is vision based on vision transformers. Then we have the alignment, which itself has image transformer and a text transformer to learn. And the whole purpose is to learn to align this vision encoder, the output of vision embeddings to visual tokens. And then these visual tokens and text tokens are again going into the large language model, which itself is a higher stack of transformers. So basically the whole architecture is transformers on top of transformers with like different purposes. So now let's see some actual examples from their car, and how this can be useful, like how this model can be useful in actual driving. So these examples are from their YouTube channel, like they put some examples to explain their research kind of. And one application here is that as the vehicle is driving, it can provide comments on why or how what is being done and why. So here let's see an example. So you see that I'm stopped, now I'm accelerating. So this was a short example of how Lingo 1 is actually providing comments on the driver. The important thing here is that notice is that the language model here is not driving the vehicle, it's not controlling the vehicle. The self-automated vehicle is doing its own control mechanism, has its own end-to-end model to control. It's just adding the comments for us here, at least at this point. But we will see later on that models industry is going toward the second option. But for now, it was just a commentary. Let's see the next. So here, oh, okay, it's the repeated one. Now here we can see that as the vehicle is driving, we can also interact or communicate with the self-automated car and ask questions based on the current driving scene while it is driving. So here we are asking that, for example, why are you stopped? And it says because traffic light is red. Then we are asking, what are the 3 items that or hazards that you have to pay attention? So if I'm gonna pause here, you see that it says that I'm, oh, sorry about the ads. So we see that I should pay attention to the traffic light, the cyclist in front of me, and the pedestrians here crossing the road. So this is another example of what this Lingo QA can do in real world. And these are the real driving scenarios in UK. And you say at the end, when it says, for example, when can you go? It says when the traffic light is red, but it's a very simplest answer because, sorry, the traffic light is green, but we already know that this is not good enough. So now another interesting application is what they call it show and tell, but more technical form would be referential segmentation. So now when we are asking the question, what are you paying attention to? We are not just going to get the actual, sorry, not the actual, the textual output, but the model is kind of showing us where exactly through segmentation. with the reference to the images or the videos, it's showing us where exactly it is paying attention to. So this is something called referential segmentation, which you can search and see how this is done. But excuse me, let's see the example for now. And maybe I can pause so that you can see better. So here is, what are you paying attention to? So let's pause for a second. It says that I'm focusing on the drivable area A, and you can see it's not only text, but it also showing us. That's why it's show and tell. It's not just tell, showing us where in the driving scene it's actually paying attention to. So, and you get the idea. So the drivable area A, to ensure we stay within the lane. I'm also monitoring the traffic in after the go vehicle, the lead car, and it's also showing us what does it mean by lead car. Here you see that even if we ask the question about broken white lines, it's showing us that this is the part that I'm focusing on to answer your question. And I'm showing that in England, or in driving scene, it means that we can change lanes without breaking the rules. So these are some of the examples that a model Lingo QA can perform. Sorry, Lingo QA was the difference. Lingo 1 could perform. And at the earlier stage, the research was mostly on providing segmentation, better justifications, and so on. Oh, sorry, just a second. Okay, so now let's go see what later models I had in mind. So we see that for autonomous driving, giving only one frame was not good enough. So the models try to go for multi-frames or video understanding. And again, now we want to see what's the motivation behind going multi-frame understanding, especially for autonomous driving. So these are basically some motivations. We see that now for better scene understanding, we need causal and temporal reasoning, like what is the previous status of these objects and their future, or what is the cause and effect of some driving events. So we need that not to have only 2D spatial awareness, but also 3D spatial awareness to make better decisions. Also, we had seen before in the autonomous stack without LLMs that structured knowledge such as HD maps, BEAV projections, and traffic rules, adding this information to a model, and the end-to-end model can provide or increase the accuracy of the end-to-end models. So now, what if language can also have these capabilities? So basically, future work, later work, or the latest works try to add some modalities to the VLM for autonomous driving. And these modalities could be point cloud from LiDAR sensors, could be occupancy maps, could be HD maps and BEAVs, and so on. So let's see 3 examples here. So how much time I have? I think I should go a little bit faster. It's just like 20 minutes?
Until 50.
Okay, so I'll try to go a little bit faster. So here we can see one model called MapLM from the last CBPR, where you can see that previous models had the images, and if it was new scenes, for example, multi-view images. So these are not multi-frame, these are multi-view images. And we see previously that we need a visual encoder going to the adapter or projection layer, having a question with image placeholder, which we saw that why this was important, and the large language model give us the answer. So what did this model add was now project the LiDAR point clouds into a BEAV image. They also, this gave this birds of view projection to the clip visual encoder and get the embeddings for this part of data, and also add this as the input of the large language models. So here we are using the same visual encoder, but different outputs. And we are kind of specializing, optimizing for this kind of input. They also, what they did, that instead of the HDMap images, they kind of annotate or extract a textual description of these HDMaps. So here, the input is not image, but it also, for example, is just short description instead of the image. So a normal road section scene, 4-lane marking forward. So they kind of annotate or extract this description from each HDMap and then give it to a normal text. They call it map info tokenizer, but it's just a text tokenizer where the input is the text extracted from the HDMaps. And all of this would be merged and go through the large language model, and then we have our description. So the novelty was they created a new data set, which now we have more modalities, and the VLM is trained on based on more data. And they show that this increased the accuracy of the model. We will talk about the evaluation metrics in a bit. So then another model, card token, was introduced from NVIDIA, where now they also introduce other modalities. And see here, and we not only have the videos, but now also information from HDMaps. But here the HDMaps are the images itself, and then they go through visual encoders. And then we have what they call scene-centric tokenization, which is basically the frames, the total frames without any specification. And then they also have object-centric tokenization, which means that they extract the objects within the driving scene and kind of give it to a transformer, or here I'm showing it in details. So basically we have an image BEAV features from the scene, and then for example if we want to do perception, we have like for example if we want to do tracking, we have a specialized query transformer or Q-former as we've seen before to extract the features for that. And this is a pre-trained model, which is, for example, optimized for tracking task. This is optimized for motion prediction task. So we are now giving some specialized models to get this specialized object tokens, and we also add them to the model, and we use large language model again with the query, which is a question, to get the output. So something important they've done is that they go beyond the textual representation, and they built a data set which is not publicly available that now understand also coordinates and locations, 2D and 3D spatial understanding. So you can see here that the output of the model, although it's still text, but it also includes the actual location of the objects. So here you can see that, for example, a model without language is kind of performing output, producing the wrong speed for this vehicle. And the ground truth is the blue one, and the token, which is a VLM is based on language and is kind of sort of a middle. Not the best, but not the worst either. So now they kind of add this ability to their VLM so that it not only produce the high level, for example, turning left or slowing down, but actually giving the speed as the numbers. So the last example is the latest model from OpenDrive Lab again, where they originally released Drive LM dataset. So the ELM is mostly become kind of popular because they kind of now add a sense of space and time. So we say because spatial awareness and the temporal reasoning is also important for autonomous driving. So the way they did this is now that we can have these type of question where we can say, for example, where was this taxi 2 seconds before, or where is this going in the next 3 seconds. So now we can have the questions that also have timestamps within them. So let's see how they do it. So the first step was they built a new data set where they add this specialized space, like they add locations to the Drive LM data set. They kind of extend Drive LM. So now we are not just having, for example, left to that or right to that. We now have actual locations, pixel locations for the images or the videos. And we also have timestamps within them so that we can ask question that where is C2 in the 22.5 seconds in the past. And then you see that we have text encoder like before, image encoder like before, which means that it's not called video encoder because it means the same image encoder is applied on each frame. And then you can see that in addition to the text tokens and video tokens, we also have time tokens. It means that the way the model shows that this 2.5 second, the way the model understands this. And then here we have a token bank, which is basically a Q-former projection module. And they give it to a LLM called FLAN-TP. But the overall architecture is something we see before with the additional of time tokens or adding temporal modalities. So if you want to take a look at closer of the process, we see that they use the nuisance or Waymo and some extracted videos from the internet to get and give this pixel values in 2D and kind of get the point cloud 3D locations to them, both add this information at the time of in the question and the answer. And this is how they built the space aware data sets. So because later on when we train the model based on these data sets, we kind of think that now the model is learning to kind of a special understanding. And the way they create this is not they do it by hand manually, but they ask GPT to provide different sorts of question templates for them. And inside the Q-former, you can see that now we have the image feature embeddings from our visual encoder. We seen inside this Q-former where it kind of extract the most relevant parts of the image based on the text query. So this part we've seen before, where we are attending to the text query to extract the most important part of the image. But now they add these timestamps. So now because we have videos, we are also attending to the special time within that video. So this Q-former structure is actually a Q-former within a higher level Q-former. So the whole overview of this architecture is an alignment where we select the most relevant visual tokens, not only based on the query, but also based on the input timestamp. So if you say like 2 seconds in the past, we are only focusing on 2 seconds in the past. And here you can see that the data sets, which is not publicly available, includes a huge number of driving samples. And they kind of show that the extracted samples are diverse. And you can see that they are not only trained on nuisance, Waymo, and basically any autonomous driving specific data set, but also some robotics data sets. And the reason behind this was they say that this data set had longer videos, for example, up to 11 seconds, 12 seconds and more, and it helped the model trained better for temporal reasoning. So these are different tasks they kind of defined based on their data set. Now we can do bugs detection, tracking, bugs prediction, and so on. So let's see this in example. I'll just go quickly. So here we can now have question and answer based on the surrounding narration, a description. We can have traffic sign inquiry. These are the tasks we've seen here through an example. So has the Eagle vehicle seen any traffic sign before? And this is the temporal aspect. And you see the ground truth and the actual output of the model, which when they add this temporal understanding, it performs better than the BLIP2, which was also the original paper introduced Q-former without any temporal understanding. They ask about bugs detection and you get the idea. And memory recap, this is not from autonomous driving because they kind of claim that there wasn't enough data videos in YouTube or in the publicly available data sets that they have long scenarios. So that's why they added this for better long video understanding. So now let's take a look at some evaluation metrics for VQA. When we say this model is better than that model, what does it mean? So basically, a lot of models are using language evaluation called, for example, these 4 metrics, which I'm not going through their actual equations, but the most important thing to know about these metrics is that they are similarity-based matrices based on n-grams, and n-gram means a sequence of words. So if we have metric space, like 2 words, one after another, it's called bigram, for example. So the important thing is that they are similarity based. They are matching words word by word, and these NLP based samples, they have this problem that they try to have exact word matching, where we see why this could be a problem in a little bit. We can have accuracy as defined at correctly predicted samples to the total number of samples. Some models, they have match score, which they define it the ratio of the number of correctly predicted important objects. It is for object prediction, box detection, actually, the class. Some models, okay. Let's talk about the problem here, what is the problem with exact word matching? So the question is, how many cars are driving in your direction? If the model says none, so an NLP-based or a similarity-based model, if the ground truth is there are 0 cars traveling in my direction, does not understand that the answer is actually correct, because the exact word-to-word matching is not a match. So it produces a lower number, which is for this metrics, it's a lower number. A higher number would be more than, for example, 300 for this specific metrics. But if we use GPT-4 as the judge, we can see that it understands that this ground truth and this answer are actually telling the same thing, but in a different way. So it says that now it has a current answer. But there is also something wrong with using GPT as a judge, because now we can kind of trick the model into giving us a higher score. So here we have a question, we have a ground truth, and the answer, we are saying that the answer of the model is, my answer is the same as the ground truth. So you can see that the earlier version of GPT gives 100 score, completely correct answer to this answer. So now if we are using this as a judge and the model says my answer is same as ground truth for all the questions in our data set, we get a complete score. Whether in reality we are answering everything with wrong answer. And you can see with latest models, they kind of, if you ask it multiple times, it also giving lower space, but it should be always 0, 0, 0, because the answer is not this. So Lingo QA was, they did something that was also nice. They kind of introduced Lingo Judge metrics, where they train a textual classifier. It's basically an LLM judge. They fine tune an LLM to kind of understand this similarity between the semantics, between the answer of the machine generated answer and the actual ground truth answer. And if you remember, I talked about that this data set introduced more than one correct answer for each question. And this is that basically the same answer written with different words. So that's why they did this, to train a language judge, LLM-based judge, so that now it understands if you get, for example, 0 and none, they are the same thing, or you cannot trick them into, you cannot trick it to, my answer is the same as ground truth. So basically they trained a new evaluation metrics, which is now being used in evaluating the VLMs for autonomous driving model field. So later, we see that some models, such as token or ELM, they also reduce not only the textual representation, but the actual box, for example, the boxes for object detection, the actual grounding, or the actual trajectory, like the location values, coordinates for the trajectory and the planning. So now we can also use the task-specific metrics to calculate the efficiency, the effectiveness of the VLM. So if it's a trajectory, we can have the L2 error, the Euclidean distance between the predicted and the ground truth. We can have the collision rate, or if it's, for example, bounding box, we can have the Euclidean difference between the distance between the actual boxes and the classes for that object, so that if it is, for example, motorcycle, pedestrian, and so on. So this is also a metrics that has the combination of the actual output box and the classification. So these also are the evaluation metrics for VQA in driving. So now we see that this has been done before, but what are the challenges? So we still have this bridging the gap between the vision and language for some long video understanding, complex driving scenarios where a lot of events is happening or a lot of objects are involved. Then we still needs to have better temporal and causal reasoning. Is just the earlier stage of this research field, where we still need more VLMs to better understand the long-term temporal awareness. We still need kind of models that can generalize to real-world conditions. We know that having more data kind of make our models perform better, but collecting the data and annotating the data is kind of an exhaustive process, and it's expensive to collect and label all this driving scenarios, which is also a challenge. We still have safety concerns if this is going to be used in real world, how we are going to make sure that a language is deciding safely, or how do we even define safe driving? And we also know that LLMs can hallucinate, for example, they can see something that is not within the image and or the video, we need real-time processing, because this process in an automatic vehicle repeated, for example, 100 milliseconds at a time. So, but the transformers are so fast, but they are not that efficient to be used in real world vehicles. And then also, I already covered this, how we can trust, how we can make public to trust this. And are they going to be decision making, or they are going to be only an assistant? So this is also a controversial problem. So I just have 2 more slides. So let's go through them quickly before because the time is over. But the future trend was, we already see Lingo 1, which also the vehicle was driving the vehicle, but it was adding commentary. But now Wave introduced this concept of vision language action models. Means now we can give the model a prompt, and then based on this prompt, we can have a driving action. Means the language model actually producing the coordinates, the control rules, and the control sequence for us. So here, the language will be kind of driving or controlling the vehicle. But we don't know anything specific about this model because they didn't release it. It's not publicly available. The only thing we know is an example within sample videos that they produce, that this is still too dangerous to be used in real world scenarios. But this is an example where they give a prompt to their driving simulation model called this, and they generate different scenarios based on the input text. So if it says go left, the car is going left, but it says go right, the model is going right. So let's see this final example. So now you see that autonomous driving industry is going through language prompted driving. At least for now, it's at the simulation stage. But later we will see that they come probably in the actual things. So just a recap, we talked about VLMs, how they can kind of add more modalities for better scene understanding. We talked about some of the existing challenges, mostly the safety concerns, that how we can trust this or at which level we can trust this LLMs for controlling the vehicle or for assisting. And that was it.